Just playing around with the settings. I'll get started in just a little bit if anybody's on. High Priestess, what's up? Dear Mid, what up? Thank you for. Can you hear me just fine, Dear Mid? Everything sound cool? Not too crazy? Mitchell, what's up? Evening. Sweet, we got it all good. And it looks like the screen is working just fine, so I'll just keep that up. Actually, I'll take it down for a minute. Yeah. What's up, MJ? So today's going to be pretty cool. I'm kind of excited to do this. Part of my professional career has been giving talks about various issues, everything from what's going on in the world, something to do with cyber, mostly cyber, and now I'm working on data dumps and stuff like that. So, and yes, I will show that it is, although I'm not hungover. So. MJ taught me everything I know. Okay, cool, Dermot. I'll just chit chat. Hey, anybody want to talk about anything in the next, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, right? We can just chit chat about life, what's going on in the world. I had a pretty good day, just kind of hanging out. I played Clash of Clans with my boys, so we had some kind of clan battle, and obviously it went well because tactics first, obviously. What's up, Frog? Hope it's not too late out there in the UK, or is it? Sorry if that was offensive. Is it Welsh or Scotland? Sorry, remind me. I don't know the etiquette. Let me go ahead and put this back on. So something new I'm doing today. I don't know if it's going to work. 10 p.m. That's not bad. All right. So I am not just. I'm using StreamYard. I'm streaming to YouTube. I'm also streaming to Twitter. I'm also streaming to Facebook, and I'm streaming to Twitch. So and LinkedIn. So don't know how that's going to work. I guess we'll figure it out. Also, all the alerts are like super loud in my ear, so I'm gonna turn that down. I think a little bit because that's going to drive me nuts. Let me see here. 12 watching. Cool. So in a few minutes, we'll go ahead and get started. Later on in the video, I'll post my next talk is at SaintCon, which is in Utah, Provo, Utah. Really excited to head out there again. I got some, I'm part of an organization we're called PepperCon. Pretty self-explanatory. We eat hot peppers, right? We have pepper powder. Basically, you know, at the conferences, we have our own we have our swag, we have our banner, we have our own crew. We've known each other for, God, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, ever since I've been going to DEF CON. I think I met the PepperCon guys the first year. You know, we talk in Discord, we go live all the time with each other. We become, you know, it's one of those kind of cool things where the cyber became like actual friends. So that's super cool. So a lot of my PepperCon guys are going to be out there, and you know, yeah, you know, my face will be on fire half the time. It's going to be pretty wild. Also, I'm basically, so the talk that I'm giving today and these slides, it's going to be, some of the slides are similar. So the base slides from the top, let's say the first 10 slides, right? Those are, whenever I do a talk like this, they're the same, right? The methodology hasn't changed much. And I'll go into all that, how we took military special operations stuff and IC stuff. And when I was at McAfee, we changed it to make it work to the cybers, basically. So, but it is 5, and I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, thanks for tuning in, everybody. You know, I hope this multi-stream thing works. If you know, if you're a friend of mine and you have my cell phone and you see something going crazy, just shoot me a text instead of throwing it in on the chat, and then I'll try to address it as we go. But so this is also sponsored. Basically, me going to these talks is sponsored by my company. This is a program that I run through the company. I don't want to say too much about it, but the company I work for is Wartower Industries. We're based out of Vienna, Virginia. I have a slide that kind of explains some of the name of the company. And there's some things that you can check out. Like if you're interested, I mean, we're always hiring. We're trying to hire the best people in cyber that we can get, right? Obviously, if you have the certain type of clearance, we would really, really love to talk to you. But for other engagements on the commercial side, you know, we have 1099 opportunities and things like that. And we, you know, if you're interested in that, obviously hit me up. Okay, so this is a combination from basically, well, let me preface this. I've been collecting data dumps since I got hired at McAfee. When McAfee was actually Intel in 2016. I hadn't considered data dumps to be an important intelligence resource, right? I'd come right out of the IC essentially and gone into basically a new gig. And he'll be on the chat in a little bit, but he's commented before, Dave, you know, Dave took a pretty big risk hiring me, right? He took a pretty big risk hiring me, but I knew I could do it. I knew it was going to take some time. I thought I was going to have about 3 months to figure it all out. Turns out, even before I got hired, like, hey man, we have a job. We have to hit the ground running. So I kind of figured it out on the fly in about 90 days. And then we had an incredibly good working methodology, right? And then over the period of the next 6 years, we really, really perfected that methodology, right? So the reason we did that, special operations, U.S. special operations, British, New Zealand, and Australia, and Canadian, right? They're the best in the world. We do share commonalities with those special operations. And one of those similarities is the way that we collect data, the way we analyze data, and the way we share data. You might have seen it on both my channel and on Stone Vet's Find, Fix, Finish, right? There's a bunch of different methodologies, and hey, what's up, Master Sergeant? Wrangler, Wrangler has a clearance, lives to cyber. Of course he does. All right. Okay. So what are we going to talk about today? And looks like my picture's a little bit in the way. And let me hide this because remember, this is only like my third one of these. So still working out the kinks, guys. All right. I'm going to talk a little bit about myself and my background, right? That will help make sense to if you're a newcomer, because MJ on here has known me since like 1996, right? He doesn't need he's stayed at my house for weeks out here in Virginia. So, he knows me. But I think the background is also important because you have to start somewhere, right? I didn't just come up with this stuff on my own. If you watched Stone Vets earlier today, or I think his last video, I came up in the video in the beginning. Basically, it's like, yeah. So as of yesterday, I have 2 decades doing this, right? And I got I didn't figure this shit out overnight, right? It took a while. It took a lot of perfecting. It took a lot of thinking. It took a lot of trusting my mentors, right? That's one big thing that I tell people now. It's like, why am I successful now? First off, positive attitude, right? 2, I actually care about America. I actually give a shit about the people I work with. I care about the well-being of the state, right? Not just the state, but also the people. I mentor people. I have mentored, and I found people to mentor me, right? So the guy who actually gave me a chance, which made this all possible, started off as a boss. His name's Dave Marcus, right? Dave went from a boss to a mentor to a friend and now family. You know what I mean? So you guys can also should strive to in some way find that yourselves. But we're going to talk about what Warcaller actually is. That's the company that I work for. Why are data dumps important? The methodology, societal, sociological, geopolitical considerations, available Russian data dumps. I'll probably go off the slides and show you just one source of where I get some of these data dumps. We're going to talk about Russian troops, Russian IT, Russian censorship, spy hunting. I got a really cool data dump, and then I found all these safe houses in the UK. We're going to talk about the human toll. So, there's been a lot of casualties between Ukraine and Russia. Obviously, both sides are lying about their casualties, right? So, with the help of some of my development friends and some of my hacker friends, we've been able to not for the whole duration of time of the war, but for the time that I built those slides, we were able to get a pretty good, accurate idea of how many Russians and how many Ukrainians have actually been killed in the conflict. Now that's soldiers, not necessarily civilians. So we are looking at the soldiers, not the overall casualties, right? Which is it's an astounding amount of death, right? So we're going to talk about VEERS, which I consider that bonus material. So if you're one of the 4chan type of people and you want to help affect the battlefield, you can do that with open source intelligence and open source satellites. One's called VEERS, and we'll get into that. We're also going to talk about China. We're going to talk about some data dumps from Iran. We'll talk about the LAPD. And actually, some of this is backwards. We're actually going to talk about the bottom stuff first. Padam, which is like an Indian shopping place that got popped, various crypto exchanges that got popped, and basically, why is the data important, and how do I use it? So let's move on. Okay, so like I said, yesterday was my 20-year anniversary. I would have retired if I would have stayed in the Marine Corps, I would have retired. Yesterday would have been my retirement day if I had chose to retire, right? So I got a pretty big family. I got 3 kids. I'm married. I am my picture on the left here. Those are the parents I grew up with. I'm adopted. In another talk, I'm going to talk about how I found my biological family. I was adopted at 3 days old, and I found my biological family at 35 years old. So that'll be a completely different podcast, probably a more emotional one, because guys like MJ and a couple guys on the chat who've known me, it was a pretty big struggle growing up, not knowing where the hell I came from, or where my looks come from, who's out there, if anybody. But that's for a different time. But my a lot of my family's into one of my sons, two of my sons live with their moms on farms. One's the Marriott Ranch and one's a farm in near Winchester. So they got cute little goats. That's me in the Marine Corps. That's 2008 Mountain Warfare School, which is pretty awesome. It's 2010 Afghanistan. It's downtown St. Louis for one of my sister's weddings. My three boys, Cole, Xavier, and Blake, me and my wife. So in the past 20 years, but the goal's the same, win, right? It's not just, the goal's not to be happy. The goal's not to make money, right? The goal's to have purpose, at least for me. And I figured that out kind of late, or maybe I figured out early compared to most people, but the goal now is to win. So when I have a task or I have something to do, I put literally everything at my ability to that task. I found out after some period of time that I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I'm not the best at everything. And I figured I had to learn how to ask for help. And that when I learned how to ask for help, this type of work became so much easier, so much faster, right? And then now I can do things that I couldn't even imagine doing on my own. Yeah, it's automated now. It's just kind of incredible. So, okay, so war calendar. My boss is Gene Bransfield. So he did a talk at DEF CON 22 called Weaponizing Your Pets, the War Kite, and the Denial of Service Dogs. So last time I checked, it had like 397,000 views. That's the YouTube link. So if you guys want to take a screenshot, or I'll post that later down in the comments section. Basically, put the collar on they made a Wi-Fi sniffer, right? And collected Wi-Fi, GPS, SD, battery. They put it all on the collar, put the collar on the cat, let the cat run around, collected all this information, right? Since then, we have multiple IoT devices. We have this device, which is called the Dope Scope, right? This is like 802.11, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth Low Energy, Bluetooth. Where's my one I have out? Well, later on, I'll show you. It's around here somewhere. It was on the charger just a little bit ago because I was, oh, here we go, right here. Now I'll put this up to the camera so you guys can kind of see what this does. So IoT devices are really, really cool. I mean, it's, the same type of device, right? If 10 years ago, this would be $80,000 to $200,000 and you'd have to have a van, right? But let's go, boom, right? So you can scan for things. So imagine this, you're in a SCIF, which is a sensitive compartment information facility. It's a facility where you can't have your Tesla keys, you can't have your smartwatch, your phone, recording devices, electronics, etc. So in those environments, and even some in banking and commercial sectors have the same type of spaces, right? You take this device and you can see if there's signals going out, right? You can take this device to a hotel and you can see if there's rogue Wi-Fi and things like that. So, but I would highly advise you check out his talk and check out our website, and I will put those links in the comments so you guys can see on your own. So why are data dumps important, right? So data dumps are important because it's an inside look into an organization or an individual. The data is through what you would consider standard intelligence methods. This type of data is almost never available, right? It's never available in this scale that we see currently, right? Data dumps are raw and unprocessed data. Typically, they show the day-to-day activities of the target of the organization or the person, and they help with understanding fact versus perception, right? So you see, let's say for Iran, you see the leaders of Iran, they're all like, oh, death to Israel. And then like, once the data dump comes out, you see that they're actually chatting with Israelis and they're trying to like, hey, sorry about that. I was worried about getting kicked out of office. Let's resume talks, So you can see fact versus perception. Now, the problem now that I've run into is there's so much of it. Right now I'm teetering somewhere around 87 terabytes of data dumps, right? That's more than a human can comprehend. So we're working on other models, large language models, AI, ML, etc., to assist. So if anybody has any suggestions, obviously shoot me an email. I would appreciate the help. Okay, So the intelligence cycle, right? Basically, what I did was when I got to McAfee and what I'm still using now, and at my jobs in the middle, right? Every organization in the world, every, let's say, first world and some second, militaries and intelligence communities and government agencies, right? You have an intelligence cycle. So I modified that cycle to work. So planning and collection, or planning and direction, collection, processing, exploitation, production, dissemination, and utilization. So planning direction, I get a task, right? You get a task. You make sure. Sometimes it's a smart task. It's the customer will tell you what they want, and then you say, "What do you actually want? What's your goal?" It's good to ask questions like that, right? And then direction. Which way are we going to go with this? What assets do we need? Collection. Obviously, collection is important. If it's a data-driven task, where is the data? Where does the data lie? Do you have the data? Do we have to get the data? Am I going to have to create nom de gores? How big's the data? Because there's a big difference between 500 gigabytes and 50 terabytes, right? So all those things come into consideration. Processing and exploitation, this is where the analysis comes in, and also the covert collection, right? So processing, creating infrastructure. If you have to pull data from a country that doesn't really like America, you have to have infrastructure to hop and proxy in and out. Production, building visualizations, which is the tool analyst notebook that you'll see quite a bit of, but we'll get into that. Editing and things like typically I've had help from PhDs and senior engineers over the years, which has been awesome, right? I always do a written executable presentation, and if I'm doing this on my own, like these talks are just to the community, right? I don't have to really write a white paper, although I am working on one on this that I'm going to publish sometime in the next few months, probably over the winter break. And then the technical expertise behind it to make this possible. Dissemination. Typically, when I do an actual project, it's NDA only. It's kind of eyes only, sensitive, compartmented information, right? And it's all adversarial. When I give this to a client, I don't redact anything, right? I could argue, and maybe lawyers could argue that legally that's not okay. But if you're an enemy of America, I'll release everything about you to everybody in the world, period, every day. And utilization. So here's something that I've created years ago. I call it persistent stare. So it's utilization and collection go hand in hand. So once you identify something as bad, we developed a system to always look at that, right? Circular. So maybe that's not daily and hourly, right? So let's say it's in this instance an IP address, right? We know that IP address sent something to something, and that something was malicious, right? So maybe the hackers were able to penetrate, get in. Maybe it was a botnet, right? There's a lot of different explanations for that. But once it's recognized as bad, that's the same with people, places, and things. It's essentially very smart from an intelligence perspective to never stop looking at it. So utilization of data for circular targeting that I call persistent stare. And hey guys, while I'm talking, if you guys got questions, just throw them in the chat. And I know this is going to be a lot for a lot of you, and hey, that's fine. Okay, I'm going to be doing a lot of these, right? And so hopefully this benefits you in your careers too at some point. Okay, the iceberg methodology. All right, we're going to start on the left. This is from U.S. Special Operations in 1967, right? So in 1967, the Green Berets figured out, like, hey, okay, all right, we're winning every single engagement that we fight, right? Every single one. And basically, it's so unbalanced. It's like it's incredibly unbalanced the way they had to fight. So above the iceberg in 1967, you see negotiated settlements, large strategic communications, and large and minor military pair operations. So like, let's say the Tet Offensive, right? That's above the iceberg. The Green Berets figured out pretty quickly that they need to find out what's going on under the iceberg, right? Who are the facilitators? Who's spreading subversive? The rat lines, weapons, logistics, communications, things like that. The Green Berets became very, very good at not just looking at the issue today. They're looking at second and third order effects. And once you start working with the Green Berets, which I have, once you start thinking like they do, it's not, you're not thinking in the now, right? You're thinking, okay, in 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, this is going to happen, or 6 weeks, or what's going to happen 10 years down the road? Like, what are the secondary, tertiary effects of what I'm doing? And so basically, we took that same methodology and we applied it to the hackers, right? So you guys have all seen this. Let's say the Colonial Pipeline that's above the iceberg, right? Large doxing, hacktivists, anonymous operations, right? WikiLeaks, that would be above the iceberg, right? If you're really trying to make a difference in stopping things, you need to look for the facilitators. You need to look for the guys who are building the infrastructure, the malware engineers, things like that. So you have to look at the experts, find the experts in the little thing, because all those guys are part of a group. There's not one single individual working these massive attacks who does everything. I mean, maybe they are out there, right? Sure, there's guys who are smart and have done all this alone, but it's very uncommon. So, okay, part of the methodology, right? So I know this is a little crazy, but I get a task, and then the first thing first, data collection, right? So where do I get data from? I get data from messaging apps. So let's say Telegram, Discord, any Telegram style app worldwide, right? I have hundreds, if not close to 1,000. I get a whole spreadsheet, username, password, and then multiple for each typically, right? Because you don't want to use the same stuff. I just use OSINT, public sources, customer data, let's say corporate stuff, paid sources. So, in intelligence, sometimes it is good to pay people stuff. I don't pay a lot, right? But it's like, hey man, I'll give you $200 in crypto if you can get the X, Y, and Z, right? Now there's extra escrow services for that. Obviously, dump sites in the dark web, right? Which sometimes I feel like I live on those. If it's data driven, let's say data. When I say data, I'm talking like in cyber data, things like IP addresses, domains, hashes, files, URLs, websites, right? If it's that type of data, it goes through an enrichment process, which is in VirusTotal. That data, when we store it in a database capacity, it's AWS. It's indexed, the SQL and Python. We spin up an EC2 instance. We're using for table data. We take it from CSV and put it into Apache Parquet. What's still unknown to me is, for some reason, Parquet reads left to right. CSV reads, north to south. For some reason, it's faster left to right. But it works, so I'm not going to complain. And then once it's in AWS, it can go to 1 to 3 databases for us: the offensive leak credential database, the defensive leak credential base. So is somebody in your organization, are there credentials out there? Offensive, we are targeting this entity, whoever it is in the world, and we have their stuff. Here's that. And then the general adversarial data dumps. So that means like Russia, right? So what's going on in Russia from what's the earliest data you have to what time were they hacked? If it's something I'm building, I put a lot of the data into Analyst Notebook, which you'll see. If it's per data dump or per country for either cyber or data dump data, that those charts are built into charts are the actual A and B single charts, right? When those are combined, it's called a master merge. Then the master merge goes into a product, and then from the product, program development, spy hunting, and large scale data collection as a follow-on. So data dumps, they've become common. You should expect them, and you're probably being targeted in some way, shape, or another, maybe by proxy, right? So if you have any social media, right, there's always hackers out there trying to hack social media and everything. All sectors, all industries are affected, right? All companies, all countries are vulnerable, right? And I created this, basically there's 5 types of data dumps, right? So insider releases at the beginning of the war when Russia invaded Ukraine, the hacker group Conti had members of both Russia and Ukraine. The Ukrainians were like the Conti senior leadership, we could say, dedicated their support to the Russian government. So the Conti people who were Ukrainian collected all the stuff and released it. And it was an unprecedented inside look into that, how that hacker group worked, right? So that's an insider release. Hacked and released without ransom. So I hacked you. I didn't ask for a ransom and I released that data. Hacked, then released with ransom. So I hacked you. I asked you to pay a ransom. You didn't. I released it. Sometimes even when you pay, still gets released. Ideological. So you could say that's religious, right? We're starting to see a bunch of that come out of Israel. So we're seeing pro-Israeli hackers hack Hamas and Iran, and we're seeing pro-Palestinian hack Israelis in multiple different facets, and also defacements and things like that to websites. And then political release, like the DNC. I have a talk. If you just go into YouTube and type in, if you type in Wally Prather in YouTube, one of my talks is DNC data in the hands of trained intelligence professional. That is one of mine. Okay, that's a great question. So what are data dump sites? Let's say breached. One comes to mind, breach.io. I think it's down from the FBI right now. But a data dump site is a place where hackers advertise, I hacked you this. Here's the data I collected. It's either free or I'm selling it for this amount, right? That's a data dump site. There's thousands of them. Some of them are on the open internet. Some of them are on the dark web. Some of these dumps are for free. Some of these dumps are paid. And these prices, for depending on the dump, you know, some of the hackers will be like, okay, hey guys, I will prove to you, I will give you definitive evidence that I hacked this. I am selling this for $1 million. You know, I'm only going to sell it one time. You could say Telegram is also kind of a dump site. If you go into Telegram and just type in breach or leaked up in the search, and you'll find hundreds of them, right? So that's a good question. All right, this is just, I mean, this is kind of an old one that's since I made this is quadrupled, right? But these are some of the Russian data dumps, right? Central Bank of Russia, we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the Russian Interior Ministry. We're going to talk about the FSB employee leak, Moscow Chamber of Commerce, Roskomnadzor, influential Russians live in the UK, SureBank, Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia, Ministry of Culture. We're going to talk about that. Sultai Boltai, that means Humpty Dumpty in Russian. I think we talked about Marathon Group a little bit. I got a bunch of emails in there. GoSec, we're definitely talking about. Talking about Russian casualty VK. VK is basically Russia's version of Facebook. Adultescort.ru. We're talking about VEERS, but like I said, we're going to talk about like some other things before we get to Russia. So tools I'm using Alice Notebook. And that's my main network analysis platform. Autopsy 4.20.0. Autopsy is a free but very it's a really awesome forensics program, right? So some of these data dumps, instead of getting the individual email, you get the whole Outlook file, and that's kind of hard to open with just, let's say, Outlook, right? But you can throw that into a forensic program, and you can separate the individual emails. You can pull out the headers. You can pull out the attachments in whatever form you want. If you only want the PowerPoints, you can do that. You can separate it by sender, receiver, and you can export that CSV. It's just a wonderful tool. I use Excel and CSV quite a bit. All my inputs into Analyst Notebook are in CSV. I have to, but in CSV, if you're saying that this row, you basically, for the algorithm, I'm telling him this row is a first name, this row is a last name, right? Typically, I like putting those together, so I use various formulas within Excel. I use file split. So a lot of these files are huge, right? You got a text file with, 10 billion things in it, right? It won't even open. So I split those up into, anything from 20,000 to 100,000 to 500,000 sections of a single document. And that basically you tell it to split the file. This is how many megabytes, gigabytes I want per file, and then where to go. Google Translate, obviously, Python, obviously, and I use 7-zip quite a bit. Okay, so a lot of this is based on human intelligence, and this is doctrine from the book, but human intelligence is the collection of intelligence from humans, specifically like scientists, key leaders, religious leaders, local personalities, heads of municipalities, states, police, clan leaders, terrorists, scientists, anybody, right? So it depends on the interest of the United States, right? It's not just the interest of the United States strategically, it's also tactically. So there's tactical human, right? That's where you're on the battlefield, you're with whatever infantry unit or special ops or whoever, right? And you have the skills, the questions to ask, how to ask those questions through a translator. And like a tactical example would be like, hey, we didn't see any kids running around in your town. We didn't see people inside. Who's here? Are we about to get attacked? Where are the IEDs? Where is the enemy? Right? Those are really good. That's a good example of tactical human. And then strategic human's a little different. You ask questions over a long period of time, paid assets, things like that. And what the really important part about human and intelligence in general is placement, access, and accessibility. This is more the strategic side, right? And there's more to this, but this is the all of this is unclassified, right? So I've double checked, I've had SSOs checked, and blah blah blah. It's basically on government websites, and which is where I pulled these specific examples. But so if I'm looking at you, do you have placement, access, and accessibility to that person, place, or thing that I'm trying to gain an understanding of in some way, shape, or form, right? But then you have to think of other things like what is that individual's level of cooperation? Does that individual have a vulnerability I can exploit if they're lying to me? Are they going to be reliable? And other questions like that. So here's a question for the actual chat, right? If you guys, there's not a lot of you in here, but let's use Iran as an example. If you were looking at the Iranian nuclear program, who do you think in that country would have the most placement, access, and accessibility to that information, right? I'll just take like 10 seconds. Throw it in the chat if you know anything about Iran in the first place, right? Okay, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, right? Good one. So, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the former president of Iran, right? He would obviously have placement, access, and accessibility to the Iranian nuclear program. But would his information be reliable? Is there a vulnerability we can use, to get him? No, absolutely not, right? So, sometimes when you look at intelligence, right, it's like, yeah, it would be great to go have the leader of Iran as an intelligence source, right? But it's not how it works, right? It's not how it works now. It's not how it's ever worked. Okay, so getting started in the actual data dumps. Now this one's kind of interesting. So this is very recent. 9,310 LA police officers. Pictures, names, and badge numbers were released on the internet. This was due to a change in the California Public Records Act, right? Now, they weren't supposed to release the names, badge numbers, and pictures of all the undercovers and the ones working in joint task force like DEA, FBI, ICE, things like that, but they did. So it's a state and a policy failure. But basically what it did was it caused a full stop to all undercover operations. It's also a counterintelligence nightmare, right? And if you're in California and you're an LA police officer, I'm sorry, it sucks. So I used the file's kind of weird. I used autopsy, saved the data in CSV, put this on the screen. So this is what it looks like in autopsy. This is what it looks. Basically, it's a single file. Now you could add extra links, like all these people are a part of the LA Sheriff's Department or whatever they're actually called in LA, right? But you can see basically the name and then the badge number, right? And then follow on. All of them have pictures in various forms. So here's what happened. If I was in LA and I was a criminal, right? I would sit, if I had a crew, I would sit down with that crew. We'd all get on computers and we would literally look at every single one of these pictures and see if we were selling drugs, selling guns, selling weapons, logistics to a law enforcement officer, right? If we found out we were, you pack up shop and you go somewhere else, right? Immediately. So, you know, really, really, really bad move. I don't know why California thought that was a good idea and, you know, LA wasn't the only one affected by this. There's multiple police departments. Some police departments, the sheriff or the police chief was just like, no, I'm not doing that, right? And then now there's ongoing legal shit, basically. It's a legal shitstorm. Paytm. So India's most loved payment app, and this one's kind of neat. This one was hacked. I can't actually see my notes, so I'm just going from memory here. But it was hacked by a hacker named John Wick. They gained unrestricted access to the entire database of the company, right? And India's a big place, right? So a small app in India might have like 500 million users, right? So if India is a target of yours, there's a lot of intelligence to be taken. Now, India does what's best for India. They're an ally, right? We're not close allies or anything like that, but this is an example of the data. So this is typical for this type of data dump, right? You'll have multiple formats where you have the in this instance the Paytm customer, their mobile number, their email, gender, the bank, their city, the state, all that base level data. Some of the other ones, like this one down here, right? You have what type of credit card they're paying with. They right over here we have like basically passports. How did they prove their identity? And then it has all that data too. So now we have, you know, close to a billion people's data. Now, sure, if you're committing if you're committing crimes, right? Awesome, right? Great. You got everybody's personal information. Start opening credit cards, right? It may not work 100% of the time, but when I took out that data and I put it in, so if you connect people by state, because it has you know their address and where they live, right, and then the actual region, and this is basically the legend. Think of this as a map legend, right? So you have the customer email, customer mobile, the bank, the city, and the state. That's why you get these massive clusters. So this cluster alone right here is, you know, 250,000 individual entities, not including links. And I've said this before in my talks, if anybody's seen them, the idea is I build large bodies of data so that I can pull out micro examples. You know, this is a micro example. So this bank, this ICICI, however it's pronounced, bank is in Nagpur, India, right? And these are the users that use Paytm. And I think I actually took some out to make it clear on the screen, but you can see gender female, that's the person's name, that's their cell phone, that's their email. So if you're not committing crimes, why is this important, right? What if I want to start sending propaganda? I have a huge body of data to start sending propaganda. Like you guys have received political spam, I'm sure in America, like, you know, this candidate, it never says whether they're, what party they're with either. It's like, oh, you know, they stand for this, they stand for that, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but you can start sending propaganda pretty quickly. With the emergence of AI and ML and different things like that, fake data, false data, right? You can start, you know, let's send a text, let's send an emergency, like our version of FEMA, like, hey, there's a tsunami coming, right? And let's send it to everybody because you know the towns. Let's find all the towns on the coast and area. You evacuate immediately. Then go rob a bank, right? Something like that. I mean, there's a million possibilities of how you could use this data maliciously, and there's a million ways that we can use this data unmaliciously. German mobile. Okay, so this one's present in multiple Telegram channels, deep dark web, leakbase.io. Hacked somewhere around August 2023. The actual date's a little shady. This is what it looks like. This is the macro. So this is big picture. So I know you can't see anything on screen. Just looks like .iism essentially, right? But then down to it, just like I said before. So now we have a name. We have a name directly tied to a mobile device. We don't call these cell phones, we call these IMEIs, right? Or in this case, being European, it's GSM. Speed Sports, Pakistan. Pakistan's biggest, basically Dick's Sporting Goods, right? They were popped. And the same type of data. We have name, we have email. They're grouped into a general or corporation, phone number, zip, state, customer ID, everything you can think of. Pop that into Analyst Notebook, right, in a table form. You have clusters. Those clusters are typically, in this case, towns and villages, right? But some of it is multiple users, multiple phones, name matches, things like that happen also. Right? This is a macro example of that data dump. US Hotmail, so blah, 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 blah. This one was released on Telegram, breached in June 2023. Yeah, that's the example of what it looks like UShop. It says it's an American one, but most of the customer base isn't. I think it's a US base, but it's geared toward like an Asian cultures living in the United States. But I'm not 100% sure of that. But pretty interesting data dump. Still the same, it's a huge body of data. This one I broke down by cost. I thought it would be interesting to change it up a little bit instead of like, where do all these people actually live, right? I did it by the cost of the purchase, right? So like in this one, they spent $101.84, right? This person spent $101.84 and $106 on a different. And then I can't really zoom in from here, but basically I put the date of the purchase as the link. So that's on this day, that individual made this purchase. Here's their email and here's where they live. In this case, Ohio, Spring Valley, California, Michigan, New York, the Bronx, Vermont, Salt Lake City, etc., worldwide. Thunderbuff, and yeah. So, I mean, this has been ongoing for almost 2 years. So I started these talks at the beginning of the war. So I've given, I want to say 35 of these at different conferences, and each one's been different. This is a combination of a lot of these. So you're not missing 1 through 8. This is just a combination of a lot of them. And there's some things I left out for some obvious personal security reasons, right? And then there's some things that I've kept in that I probably shouldn't, but hey, who knows? We'll see how it goes. Kraken Crypto. So that's the owner, Jesse Powell. His home was raided by the FBI in March. He's been a big target for hackers. Kind of a lot of crypto exchanges, crypto everything's been a huge target for hackers. He was accused of cyber stalking. Millions and millions of dollars are missing, right? So they got hacked. And so a lot of these accounts, right, if you were going to commit crimes, there's not a lot of money. Like a lot of people like, oh, refer a friend, you call that friend like, hey man, if you create an account, I get an extra $10. Hey, I'll buy you a few beers, right? And people do that. That account never gets touched again in a lot of these cases, right? So from a criminal element, I'd imagine you could automate some of that, move the money directly from the crypto wallet into a tumbler, and then from a tumbler, just tumble it. And if you're not familiar with a tumbler, it takes a digital cryptocurrency monetary value, it breaks it up into millions, thousands or millions or billions of bits, and then it changes all those bits, and then it puts it back together, right, for a small fee. This is what that one looks like. I mean, this is just a 5,000 cross section. So, I mean, it's an incredibly huge amount of data. This is all U.S. persons, or not all. It's a lot of U.S. persons. So it's trying to be a little discreet with it. So the cross section, these are interesting. So this person has different names or similar names, but they all have the same cell phone. So that's weird. It could be 3 accounts. It could be some type of fraud. But just the same. So in this case, we have their passport, we have their name, we have the date of birth, their age, their cell phone, their email, and other personal information. GY, grow your base. So this one was interesting. They're not being very forthcoming with their clientele. I'm not a client of this at all. Very little's known about the breach, but it's definitely looks like they've been breached twice. If you go to them with like all their own data and you say you got breached, they're like, "Oh, no, man." You're like, "Yeah, dude, you're really bad at your job." So that's what that looks like, the master, right? So this is the username and password base, right? So here's something I got about 10 slides of this. Stop using shitty passwords, right? Don't be stupid, right? Stop using shitty passwords. Queerty123, you know, there's going to be a ton of slides of this, right? If you use a shitty password, you're going to get popped. And some of the Russian examples of this that we'll get to in maybe 20 slides, right? Really crazy. But don't use shitty passwords. You're going to get popped, right? They're easy to break. From let's say if this was still encrypted, the encryption for depending on what type for all the simplest commonly used passwords is already publicly open sourced, right? So they're pretty easy to break. GitHub. This was released. Poor response, poor remedial action. Basically, their entire user base of here's the username, here's the password was all released. They're just like, yeah, and basically the suggestion is, hey man, you need a forced password reset to your entire clientele. They're like, why? It's like, okay, all right, that's cool. Yeah, man, if you want to lose all the money, they're like, they don't have two-factor, blah, blah, blah. Really, really bad practice. So don't use them. This is 360,000 out of millions. Obviously, you can see it's pretty big. And another, I'm going to hit on this again. Bad password equals vulnerabilities. Just like before, QWERTY123 password with $signs, because that's not original, right? Password one, query 12345, 1234556, 1211111. Like they're very, very, very common, and it's a very, very bad, stupid habit. Hashing space, this is super shady business, right? Breach is not yet at the time I built this, which was last month. I built this slide for Hack Redcon, which was in Louisville, Kentucky. I don't think they've recognized that they've been hacked still, or they've admitted to the breach. But it's like, hey guys, listen, you're totally popped. Yeah, they literally had their way with you. So the same thing. So this is a partial master. So this is anywhere between 20 and 40, 50,000 individual username and passwords. Now, when you're looking at passwords, if you own a company, or you're a CISO or a CTO, or you're in IT and you're in charge of any type of, let's say, password management for your company, right? You shouldn't see clusters. So see these things up here? These are called clusters, right? You shouldn't see it. It shouldn't be a possibility that same password is used by multiple users, right? It shouldn't happen, but it does. And once again, like I said, I'm hammering it home. Password one is not a good password, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, QWERTY, Pokemon, Indiana, poop, 1, 2, 3, 4, police, 911. Those are not good passwords, right? I don't have to go into it. You guys can just Google what's a defined strong password, or even use ChatGPT. I don't know. Use whatever you want, but don't have passwords like this. Right? This is another one. I'm going to go through the rest of these kind of fast because I want to get to the Russian stuff. But another exchange hacked this year, right? They had security lapses. Basically, bad employees not doing stuff. First time they got hacked, they lost $72 million. It's quite a bit of chunk of change. It makes you really wonder whether I'm in the right business, right? Although I don't want to run the rest of my life, but 440,000 usernames and passwords. This is just a small cross section of that, but once again, see these clusters up here? Not good, right? Pakistan 123. Guess where those people probably live? Pakistan, right? QWER 1, 2, 3, 4, ABC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Fuck the world. So what do we know about this? guess where Pakistan people are. If Pakistan's in your passport, those guys are probably located in Pakistan. QWER is not good. And Kimberly over here, because this is Kimberly. Kimberly had a bunch of different emails, right? She is really pissed off and really angry. So right now, as we speak, there's two different things going on with Iran when it comes to being hacked. People are hacking on behalf of Iran, and people are hacking Iran. So there's an anonymous op Iran. They're hacking everything. They've hacked the Iranian software they use on the phones to track their civilian population. There's a software called the Ben Manhama. I forgot what it is in Farsi, but their national standards organization has been hacked. The Ministry of Cooperation, Labor, and Social Welfare. When you hear that, don't think of that as a comparison to a Western social welfare. That is more like, how do we deal with people who don't wear their hijab right? Should we stone them to death? Should we beat them? Do they get whipped? What's the punishment, right? It's not like ours. Iran WhatsApp was hacked, and Iran Telegram user leak was pretty cool. Op Iran, like I said, it's ongoing. This is one of their, this is the National Standards Organization, right? So the cool thing about the Iranians, or the bad thing about Iranians, is they're not worried about us coming into their country. And so every organization from the government level, they have pictures of basically everybody who works there, right? And if you were working this, you would literally pull out every single picture. They're wearing, as you can see, they're wearing their badges, right? So if you had a very clear image, like you could get some badge information from them, you know, not very smart, OPSEC-wise. Let me pull out my translate and see what this is, because I can't remember everything. Or can I? Okay, there we go. But I think this is request for services. Let's see. Okay. Yep. So this is through that same, this is basically orders for food, agriculture, consumer goods coming into the country, basically kind of like our customs, right? Now, I don't know if you guys know this. They don't use the same calendar. We use an imperial calendar system. Their calendar is called Hijri. Hijri calendar. So obviously in the Islamic world, they don't use the calendar that starts with the birth of Jesus, right? It's Muhammad's death. So, or it's his birth. I can't remember, one of the two, but it's, their calendar is called Hijri. And I already took pictures of these two. Give me 1 second. I'll explain. Here we go. All right. So on any Islamic document from the government, this is basically, you know, Almighty with the blessing of Muhammad, the prophet, you know, that's very, 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 very common, right? This is the symbol of the organization. This is from the Ministry of Industries and Mines and the Iranian Institute and Standards and Industrial Research, right? And this document's basically reiterating regulations forthcoming for various items of interest at the time. The document on the right is numbers of inspectors and experts for various projects, right? There's a shit propaganda in Iranian documents. It doesn't, it's everywhere, right? You know, I would equate that to the hammer and sickle during during the Soviet Union era, where like the hammer and sickle, or let's say the swastika, right, was everywhere. You know, they're very, very good at their PR and just like and their propaganda throughout the country, right? Because that guy on the left, that's Soleimani, and he is dead. He ate a bomb from a drone at the Iraqi airport. So, and it's a good thing he's dead, because he's not a good person. This is the Ministry of Cooperation, Labor, and Social Welfare, hacked by your Anon Spider, 75 megabytes. This is Iranian people's personal information. So they are basically using very specific custom spyware, and they're spying on the entire country, right? So obviously things like it calls to countries like America or Canada or the UK or Sweden, let's say, or, you know, anything in Europe, right? Calls out of the country would flag. And if they flag enough, they're going to start really looking into you. It is difficult to get information like this back to the population in mass. It is hard to judge how much of the population 100% believes in the government and how much doesn't. But it seems like there is a significant amount of people within the country who don't trust the government. Iran WhatsApp. So why is stuff like this important? Once again, like if I'm trying to sway a country's ideology, right? I wouldn't just start by saying, hey, fuck the Iranian government, right? That's not how you start, right? You start slow. Let's say this list is 250,000 WhatsApp cells, and I don't necessarily know who the person is at the other end, but I can use multiple programs to send those out to load up all the numbers, and I can send a message en masse, right? And I can tier that. I can say, okay, the first 10,000, I want you to send the message on Tuesday. The next 10,000 Wednesday. Wednesday evening, send another 20,000, right? With a different, a slightly different version of the same message, like, hey, outside of Tehran, the Iranian police killed, even if it's completely false, like a psyop, right? Like, killed the lady, although she was in, let's say the Iranian police killed this lady, although she was not doing anything against Islamic law, right? And then start there and just start hammering. So this is really, 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 really cool. All right, so basically, Anon Squad 303, they got this giant list. I don't know who they actually hacked to get the information. I'm really glad I got it. So this is one of the masters for it. It's basically all the people who've come from Russia, Russian passports, who have a visa in the UK, and it's very specific information, like where do they live, what business, cell phones, emails, all their pedigree information, just like if you came to America, right? Full name, previous addresses, mother's maiden name, all that. It's all in here, right? So, with data like this, my spidey sense kind of went on high alert, right? So this is something like this is just normal. So this is one person. That's the address where they are living at. Here's where they're working, the address of that place of business, right? The little designator under that is the country of origin, which is the Russian Federation, obviously, because we're talking about Russia, But then you start seeing things like this. When you see clusters, it's like, huh. So houses in the UK aren't like a base townhouse or a row home. It's kind of not like ours. They're the size-wise, they're smaller than ours, right? So for this little townhouse, this is a duplex, right? There's 10 people living there, and there are 8 businesses. Right, know that. So is that plausible? Yeah, sure, that could be happening, right? It's not very likely, but it gets significantly more. Yeah, I found you, buddy. Sorry. It gets significantly more complicated, right? When you have stuff like this, right? So before 9/11, I was going to school for architecture, right? And this is 600 and let me, if I can't see my notes, but this is 668 people, and I think it was 688 businesses out of that house, right? Now, everybody who's watching, everybody's going to watch this knows that there are not 600 people living at that house, right? It's a safe house, right? It's a pass-through location. It's basically fake. So found a safe house, obviously, right? There's not even enough room in the floor plans, because I looked up this building and actually did some homework behind this. I'm not just shooting out from the hip here, right? Even if you had triple or quadruple racks and you had them within like 6 inches of each other in the entire space of the whole house, can't fit that many people, right? So playing the devil's advocate, that doesn't work all the time. And obviously some of this, I passed this data on to British friends that I've served with in the past. They have tried to get that to the proper authorities. it's some people are very thankful of it. Other people are like, why are you even doing this? Right. So it's like, hey, listen, I'm doing this for me. If you don't want it, fine. Like I'm not going to try to convince you to protect your own country. That's your problem. Here's another example, a kind of a small home. You have a significant amount of businesses and people, and there's thousands of examples of these. There's tens of thousands of examples that look legitimate. It looks like a family unit, like mother, father, two kids. The mother works at this cafe or works at this Russian language school. The father's doing some type of construction job, right? And they live at a house, right? Those seem legitimate. Right. And sure, could they be spies? Yeah, absolutely. Right. Part of being a spy would be blending into your environment in multiple scenarios. Right. But there are discrepancies in this data that can't be ignored by the US, and they can't be ignored by the British government either. So what was I getting? This Garrett Lane. I haven't been there. I don't know where Garrett Lane is actually, other than on a map. Maybe you guys who are logged in from the UK could explain more in the chat if it has significance locally. I don't know, but Garrett Lane. There's a lot of Garrett Lane. Seems to be maybe that's a Russian district, like we have Chinatown or Koreatown, right? But they're in like basically a 2.9 mile stretch. There's like 20,000 Russians, maybe a little less than that. Maybe it's more like 16. Maybe it's 12 to 16. But what it says is the business on their visas or their refugee status is not the name of the businesses on literally 100% of 100% of the street view, right? So if they say their business is whatever. But if Russians eat borscht, let's say a borscht soup kitchen, right? If it says that that's their job and it's at that address, there is very little indication that is legitimate as a business. So Vicante. So this one's great. All right. So we got two data dumps from VK. VK is Russia's version of Facebook. Basically, it's the easiest way to describe it. I have 27 million users' first name, last name, email, and phone. And then I have 92 million usernames and passwords for VK. VK doesn't have strong password standards in the first place. They know they've been hacked, and they haven't forced a password reset. So what does that look like? Now the username and password. So this is a little bit more complicated. Obviously, I put the first name and last name together, right? The mobile, email, right? And this is going to be another example of passwords, right? So username, password, non-encrypted, obviously, right? Examples of passwords, once again, why have a strong password policy and don't do stupid things on the internet, right? So that 111111, not a good password, right? This person has a lot of really shitty passwords like 6666666, 767676, blah, 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 55555, 88888. Not smart. What I didn't realize, because I never worked Russia professionally, essentially, for the past 20 years until most recently, they really, really like anime. Like, they really love anime. Like, I'm not an anime guy, but like, just from VK alone, let's say somewhere between 30 and 40,000 of the passwords have something to do with anime, like Naruto or all the other animes that I don't know anything about because, I just don't. It's not my thing, right? So Humpty Dumpty. So Humpty Dumpty was previously incarcerated for hacking. He's one of my favorite Russian hackers in the world. He's not really a friend of America, not really, but he's also not really a friend of the Russian government. But what he is exploiting is corruption, and he's doing it in a very, very, very interesting way. Like this one's interesting. Syrian Arab Republic. He is hacking people like the Ministry of Defense. Like I forgot what type of watch this is, but I was told this is a $100,000 watch. If you're a ground soldier, right, you shouldn't be able to afford that type of stuff. or you're a commander. But like let's say the Russian defense budget, this is kind of important, right? I forgot the defense minister's name, but he's one of Putin's cronies, right? So let's say their budget's $9 billion a year for defense, right? He gets a third right off the bat, right? He literally siphons a third off the top. Another third gets siphoned to the people who are below him on some capacity, right? And a third ends up to the actual troops, which is then also split up in different things, and there's not enough money for training the beans, bullets, bandits, right? Super important for fighting wars. So, he's exposing some of this corruption. He's also basically exposing spies on various levels, right? People of interest. He's got a big badge thing going on, which is kind of that's a popular thing in let's say the U.S. hacker and researcher community is like pulling badge information from the internet. You can use badges for a lot of different things, like pen test, physical pen test, red team, etc. I bet I have 500,000 passports, pictures. It's pretty wild, and a lot of that's due to him. So he's been very influential, and just he hacks you, he sends everything, right? Now, some of these are, she's a spy. You don't have to speak Russian to know. Well, shit, my picture's in the way. Let me, well, I can't move it. Okay, so, but basically the same picture of the fat guy, right? Shitty car, nice car. You're either a pig or a panda. You don't speak Russian to figure that one out. This one's talking about voting, if I remember correctly. Their memes, and like that's one of the opposition leaders, right? He's basically the only opposition leader in Russia. So, all right. So this one's from 2014. This is kind of interesting. All this has since failed because of corruption and various things, but Russia does not have any Black Sea, deep sea ports, so they can only a certain type of vessel can come into Russia with goods and services, oil, fuel, liquid natural gas, etc. Right? So they realize there's a problem. This explains the money that they're going to need, and when they're going to need it. We're talking, billions of. Steal your content. I'm going to beat your ass, Dave. All right. So, yeah, that just threw me off. Thanks, Dave. But yeah, so basically they need so many billions of rubles to complete the mission, and then it's basically where's that money going to go? Then we see emails like, "Hey, where's the money?" Right? The money actually didn't show up. Then the people actually working on the projects have to go to their basically. What are they called? What are those rich oligarchs, right? And so then now the government sends checks. It gets split up by corruption so many times. There's not enough money to actually do the project. So then they have to go to the oligarchs who also siphoned off the top, right, to get some money back to start doing the project. And this is from SureBank, right? So one of the deposits. This is what, 4 million or 42 million rubles or whatever. So. Boltai also released political entities, right? It's one of those things where they're, hey, you're going to work with us or you're going to prison, right? There's a lot of that in there. He's been exposing the corruption on a significant level. I don't know if you guys have been following it, but a lot of guys like so oligarchs or people who have fallen out of favor of Putin, they all seem to fall out of Windows. The Windows security in Russia must be absolutely atrocious, right? Because they all seem to fall out of Windows, right? From 30 stories. So I forgot where I was going with this, but this is one of the IKEA guys, something I can't remember, but I'll post that into the comments later once it comes to my mind. It's been a while since I've seen this one. So this is interesting. Now, yeah, this is professionally translated by a coworker. Basically, the head of some of these departments, right? They're talking amongst each other about where they're hiding money, right? So this says, let's see. Pasha's money. Take a closer look. He's taking the money. He skims off the top. He's buying real estate. He's this guy, whoever Volka is, thinks he's a douchebag. Helps Pasha build an offshore company and to withdraw all the money there. Blah blah blah. And basically, they're saying it's a foolproof plan. It's obviously not a foolproof plan. And then there's some slang in here that I don't typically understand, but yeah, I mean, there's 1,000 emails that there's 1,000 emails in here that are basically the corruption's everywhere, right? It's in every element. It's everything from trash to funerary services. It's in every ministry. It's in every government. It's in roads. It's in people who change light bulbs. Right? I mean, everywhere. Everybody gets their cut. Right now, sure. I don't know that you can say that America's not corrupt on some level, right? And obviously, there's corruption, right? People get arrested for it all the time, right? That's why we have we have financial crimes field division with the FBI. Right. In Russia, like some of the most, actually, I think that might be my next slide. Some of the most corrupt people in Russia are the people who are supposed to be the ones managing that, right? They're taking the cut too, right? And when they don't, forgot what this is exactly, but I'm pretty sure this guy got removed from office for being not corrupt enough, right? And then it's basically saying, hey, instead of getting fired, he left for personal reasons, if I remember correctly, right? This guy, okay, I remember this one. So Sergei Borovich Ivanov, Russian senior official, politician, special representative of the president on issues of environmental activities, ecology, and transport, which he has literally zero qualifications for. But basically in this, I'm going from memory here, so if you speak Russian, please correct me. He's basically saying, no, there is no corruption. If there is corruption, it's not at the top, it's at the bottom. So the people who are accusing the top of corruption are actually the ones who are corrupt, right? It's pretty typical. When I was doing some research, somebody brought up to me, this was a Nazi tactic, right? So the Nazis in the early 1930s, they looked at what they were doing wrong, basically, or let's not just say wrong, but say what could be used against them as a vulnerability. And then they just started blaming the opposition parties of what they were doing, right? And so then kind of the same thing is going on here. They're the senior people in government, the Russian government, are blaming the people on the bottom, not the top, even though everybody knows it. If you're familiar with Alexander Solzhenitsyn, he wrote one of his books is The Gulag Archipelago. I'm paraphrasing from memory here, but he goes, one of his most famous quotes is, we know they're lying. They know that we know they're lying. They know that they're lying, that we know that they're lying, but still they lie, right? So that's how Russian politics works. GoSec. So GoSec is awesome, right? I don't know any of these guys. I don't have a relationship with them. I'm on their Telegram channel, but at the time I made these slides, they released two things. They released the entire Russia's UAV program, both offensive and defensive, but all the documents, every single document, each page was an individual picture, which is a pain in the ass. And they also were very interested in fruit and fruit and deliveries by trailer. I know it's weird, but it happens. So the Russian UAV program, right? We're talking, when I say everything, I'm talking, this is the entire program from the military order to the manufacturer, the contractor, all the in-betweens, C2, who's making the fuel lines, who's making the fuel compartments, who's making the forward-looking infrared, mobile C2, static C2, satellite comm, the munitions, right? So if it's an a drone, who's taking care of those munitions, loiter time, all the details that you could possibly ever need to defeat a UAV. We have literally all of that. So here's two different times. I think one's called the I forgot what they're called. Well, what they're actually what the UAV is called. But I mean, so you can see really kind of clearly they're trying to mimic U.S. drones in various ways, like our RSQ-1 Reapers, the Pred drones, things like that. They're trying to emulate that into their own version. But these are total weight, loiter time, total pounds of fuel, etc. Various details. The contractors, that's the actual contractor who's going to be building those. This is the front page for one of their briefs, talking about its capabilities, right? Temperatures, right? Will the fuel freeze? Now, this is interesting. This is the whole fuel management system, right? All the sensor capacity for it. So, I mean, when you have a schematic like this, I mean, it's pretty obvious. If you shoot this anywhere in the wing, pretty much, anywhere in the midsection, right, that thing's going to catch on fire and that thing's going down, right? This is their mobile C2. Now, obviously, these are some generic. These are basically like, if you were in the military, you've seen these before. It's like the training video from the 80s that has literally nothing to do with what you're doing now. But obviously, you can see by the screens on the picture on the left, it's pretty old. But it does explain basically, the entire mobile capacity. So you can take this basically Connex box, right? Here's what's in the Connex box. Here's, basically you have a commander. It's got a telegraphing line of sight, IR system for communication, direct line of sight for the drone, also SATCOM. What does it do? What are the ranges? Obviously, this is the dashboard for some of the control systems. That's pretty good to know, right? Moscaprita. This one was this. This is from DDoS Secrets, hacked by Network Battalion 65. It's one of the anonymous groups. This company, they claim to work with the Moscow Chamber of Commerce. It doesn't. It's kind of just super corrupt, little like subcontract maybe. But if you need visa support, it's like they provide it at a substantial cost. So it's like now, if you want to leave Russia, you'd have to go through these guys, right? Maybe your visa, if without corruption, maybe your visa would cost $25 US, right? With everything going on now, it's going to cost you like $2,000. But if anybody here's ever worked as a targeter in U.S. Special Operations, Moscaprito deals with infrastructure in Russia. So we're in Iraq and Afghanistan. We had such good networks and such good intelligence that we could tell you, hey, which way does the door open, right? Does it open out or does it open in? So are we going to kick the door or are we going to blow that door with C4, right? We have thousands and thousands and thousands of architectural schematics for Moscow, for St. Petersburg, all the major cities, right? And these are for the government buildings, right? And these are for, let's say key infrastructure. If you were doing dynamic targeting, things that you would really want to know, right? So unless they tear down all the buildings and then rebuild them differently and actually have some OPSEC, which Russians don't have any OPSEC, we also know from this where are all the flaws in all the buildings, where are all the gaps, where are the flaws. So what contractors are doing what and why. So that's kind of cool. Russian, especially the Chamber of Commerce in Moscow-Pritsdia, they are really, really, really into fireworks, right? This PDF is live. Oh shit, fuck. Let me exit out real quick and open that up just as an example for you guys. I embedded that. Then I'm going to reshare my screen as soon as that pulls up. Here we go. All right. I do that. This is kind of, add some comedy, right, into this because it's just kind of hilarious, right? Oops. There we go. Is it working? It's the entire screen. Boom. Okay. All right. So these are ads in Russian for fireworks, right? And judging by the receipts, the chamber, for whatever, I don't know Russian holidays, but for whatever celebration that they were buying fireworks, I mean, they spent a lot of money on fireworks. And obviously the imagery is awesome. Like they have, various American killers and blah blah blah, and but the dude, their mascot, looks like a Canadian mountain man or logger. But yeah. So Russians, I did not know Russians are super duper duper into fireworks, right? And they spend a lot of money on fireworks. So let's go back full screen. See if this works on it. All right, boom. Good, it worked. Did that actually work? Yep, it did. So this is kind of like a daily brief for what in what we might call an intelligence summary. So at least the Department of Commerce commander of some sort or some department head would receive these on a daily, and it's the ones that I have are all sorts of different things. It's never based on the same topic per day, right? So in this example, like they're talking about the Internet of Things, this German Economic Committee, apps that they should or shouldn't use, glue up or Zoom, compliance preparation for like an audit within their own government. I don't have my notes, so I completely forgot what this is, but this is obviously some type of budgetary document. I forgot what this is. Can't see my notes because of StreamYard's a little weird when it comes to like notes, but I'll figure that out for the next time. So, but if you speak Russian, take a screenshot. Let me know. Anti-corruption department, right? The anti-corruption department is literally the most corrupt in all of Russia. Period. Fucking period. Right? It's insane. Right? The documents and where some of this money went. Like this guy, I forgot this guy's name. Super duper corrupt. Like, I mean, let's say their salary equivalents, like as one of these department heads or directors or czars or whatever you want to call them, is maybe equal to 120 to 140,000 US, right? But these guys are driving Maseratis. They live in huge mansions. They have cabins in the Ural Mountains for their hunting trips and things like that. It's siphoning all the money off the top. But the anti-corruption department is the most corrupt out there, period. I showed a little bit. If you were on last night, I showed a little bit of this. And my opinion is still the same. This one's from Anon Files. Don't get a hooker, right? Don't hire an escort, right? These girls are 99.99999% of these. The women who are being exploited in these ads, right? They're not doing that on their own accord. Okay, they're being forced to do it. They're being human trafficked. They're essentially sex slaves, right? Similar leaks that we've exploited before in my old job. Ashley Madison's obviously one of them, right? It's just not a good idea. And in the same sense, right, if you're the type of person who wants to keep your anonymity and just not get busted doing something, like these are not the sites to go on. Like they don't have security. They're easy to pop, but a few examples, right? So this is one. It was broken down into about 60, 70 sections based on cities like Prague. Like they have a division in Prague, Marseille, France, Paris. And it's broken down basically into these 6 categories: the cities, the bookings, the rates, the services, the top girls, the units, and they number and label. Some girls go by names, most go by numbers, right? So this is an example. So I forget what they call the guy, the John or whatever, he instigates with an email, right? And so Sean Mark Gilead, right? This basically says, hello, he's basically wants to have an encounter with Laura. He's 66 years old. He's 1.73 meters tall, 118 kilograms. He apologizes. He understands that he's typically not the type of person that a girl like this would date. But then he's trying to, negotiate the when and the where, blah, blah, blah. But if this guy's still alive, he probably is. He's a dirtbag if you ever meet him in France. Now the Japanese, for whatever reason on this site that was hacked, there's a significant amount of Japanese people in Europe hiring these types of escorts, right? Every one of let's say I read 100 of their messages. Even though I don't agree with the activity, they're very polite about it, right? I mean, I guess that's the Japanese culture, right? Everything's dear Russian escorts. I'm Kenzo from Japan, right? I'm staying at this hotel. They're very polite. Here's their actual phone number, etc. Screen names and all that. That's the actual lady who it was going to, right? A different Japanese guy. So although the activity is terrible, at least the Japanese are polite when they ask. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but I just wanted to throw that out there. So if you're involved in any of these sites on any way, it might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, it might be in 5 years, right? Like Ashley Madison is a great example. Like I will get the data and I will exploit it fully. I will do a talk publicly about it, and your wife will find out, or your husband will find out, or your kids will find out, right? Or your work will find out. So just be a decent moral human and don't fucking do it. SureBank. So SureBank is the largest bank in Russia, right? Oldest bank in Russia. About 45% of all retail assets go through it. It was hacked by the Anonymous Collective. And thank God they did, because it is great. I've showed this off a few times. Before Russia invaded Ukraine, there many entities this is like a major billion-dollar entity, SureBank, right? So they realized that there were some gaps in their security, right, that they needed to fix. So they were basically reaching out. We actually had decent relationships with Russia for a little while, right? So they were reaching out to, in this case, Intel, Huawei, various other companies, right, for basically bids and assistance. And so here's an example, like the Intel example. And when I say Intel, this doesn't mean Intel's bad, okay? At the time, relationships were good, right? So, but this is an example of what Russian entities are looking out for themselves from a cyber capacity. They realize that companies like Intel have solutions that they're really looking for. And this one's just happens to be related to, I believe, AI. Yeah, Intel's AI strategy. And this is starting to get a little older. They talk about chip safety, their processors, how things work. And this is a sales brief, right? So like a sales guy or an engineer would be giving this brief to representative of the bank. Let me exit out of this one. Now the Huawei one is what I thought was very interesting. And there's thousands of these. I haven't even had a chance to go through all of them. Gaming monitoring, right? When they say gaming monitoring, what the hell does that actually mean, right? Are they monitoring for influence? Are they monitoring for monetization? There's a lot of different things you could say about it, right? But they are obviously, I'm just going to, because I don't speak Russian, so we're going to go down a little bit. I mean, you see Twitch and YouTube here. You see Blizzard here. Blizzard's a really big name. They have some of the top players for various esports, right? Let's keep going. There we go. So these are the top tiers of esports, right? League of Legends, obviously. Every other damn commercial on YouTube is League of Legends. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, PUBG, Warcraft, Fortnite. Obviously, these are things that almost all of you have heard of, right? They have everything broken down by user base, how to influence it, what to influence it with, Twitch versus YouTube. How does the interface work? I mean, they basically have everything on lockdown, right? So interesting stuff. Let's see what this is. I can't remember now. Let me go back. VLP, Visual Loyalty Program. Yeah, I think this is banking app safety, or camera safety, or it must be camera safety because there's cameras. But you know, just like Iran, like if you want to start making some profiles on some people, they're more than happy to tell you who they are, what they do, where they live, their cell phone, their email, blah blah blah. The cool thing about intelligence, right? Like everybody overcomplicates it. The movies overcomplicate it. Sometimes if you want to know something from somebody, go buy them a beer and ask them, right? Or in Russia, buy them a shot of vodka, or however it works, right? I never worked Russia, so I don't know, but um, that's obviously a grain of salt. And I forgot what this one is, but it's obviously metrics and numbers and very, very cool stuff. I don't know who Jeff Goldblum. Do I know Jeff Goldblum? Is he an actor? He is an actor. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. Remember, so Dave's the one I was talking about, who's my great mentor, right? So when my last trip to Japan, I had a just my youngest son. He was, I don't even think he was 1 year old, but oh, they're just like so polite. They're just like, oh, would you like us to drop you off at the red light district? We have suggestions. It's like, yeah, uh, no, I'm good, thanks, guys. So it is an acceptable industry in Japan, not a taboo. Start.ru is basically Russia's Netflix, right? Got their entire user base. Now these ones are hashed, a little bit harder to break, but with the right software, you can break these pretty easily. Now, why would you? I don't know. It's just something I threw out there, right? They have a Netflix too, and that Netflix has been popped. So Russian casualties at the time. So this is over a year old. I haven't relooked at it. Uh, so I think we started in, what was it, 2 years ago, February, and we went to, I want to say that August, right? And the way we did this was kind of a simpler internet scraping script. Basically, we used multiple sources, though, Telegram, and we looked at funerary services across Russia. So crematories, every funeral home, everything that had to do with anything funerary services in Russia, right? Also, we looked at Russian social media, and we looked at the moms, and we looked at keywords, right? So the candle thing's pretty big. There's certain keywords, right, that if you search for, you can find the dead, because obviously, um, the moms are pretty pissed, right? The moms in Russia have been some of our best resources for getting, let's say, quasi-accurate numbers. Now, do I know if some of these people are actually dead or if there's confusion? I couldn't tell you, right? It's so convoluted and so bad. But this is one of the Telegram channels I use. I forgot what that means, but at the time, it seemed like there was 176,000 dead, at least 500,000 wounded, 1,000 plus POWs. Now, I've heard numbers as high as recently 240,000 dead, and I've heard numbers as low as 40,000 dead. It's hard to say, right? Sometimes maybe that, let's say this guy who's passed away here in the middle, maybe his information was posted on 7 different sites, right? So that number could be inflated. There's a lot of different things. So I'm not saying that it is 176,000. I'm just saying some of the data says that it's an estimate, right? It's hard to say collect this, but don't collect that, right? And then going through 176,000 things is a lot, right? So that's what the data says. It could be a lot less. It could be a lot more. The reliable sources that I trust, just to get to have Russia stop fighting, it's going to take 500,000. It's going to take 500,000, right? That's how many casualties they need to have. That's dead. If they have typically a warfare now, and basically medical triage for both Russia and Ukraine is absolutely shockingly atrocious. So it's like for every one kill, it's it's like 2.2 wounded, right? And those wounded end up dying anyway from infections and stuff because their medical triage capacity in the immediate sense is shockingly bad. Right? It is not like ours. I can also break it down by unit. So I've done a lot of this just trying to figure out basically their entire military structure, right? That's not so hard to do, right? But a lot of the websites, they'll have the guy's name and he was a member of this unit or whatever. So I've collected all that and I've kind of like, what units are hit the hardest? What role did that person play? And some of the roles just says ordinary. Like if they're ordinary, like what does that mean, right? Is it just like you put on a uniform and they give you some ammo and you go fight? It's like, I don't know. It must be. The FSB. So since then, this is actually increased dramatically. So this one's 1,200 FSB agents, the ones that were actively working in Ukraine at the time. What I'm trying to do, even though I'm not getting necessarily, I don't have a customer for it, let's say, but I've uncovered like thousands and thousands and thousands of FSB agents, right? So. This is the leader of the FSB is Alexander Yasovich, how you ever say that, Bortikov. But what I've done is I've taken it, like I said before, macro to micro, right? So here, this guy, I think this guy, if I remember, he's an FSB analyst. Don't quote me on that. I know who he co-inhabits with. So these are the two people he lives with. We also have the addresses. They're not on this one. His previous VKs, his Facebook, one of his nom de gores, right? All that's listed. So this guy is also this guy. This is from the same set of data. So this guy, Nikolai Petrovov Yurev, right? Hey, he's the head of the Department of Military Counterintelligence for the FSB. Great guy to know, right? Great guy to know. He would love to have all of his information, right? So, but like we talked about placement, access, and accessibility, and Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, you wouldn't go straight to him, right? We know who his close associates are, and we know who his family is, right? So that's his daughter, Yuriva, Alexandria. If I was trying to get to him, I would basically start with her, right? Through multiple methods of doing stuff like that, right? Basically, the don't click on shit methodology. Just don't click on shit ever. This is what I think is a sparrow. I'm not 100%. A sparrow is a male. A sparrow specifically is a female spy who goes find lonely men from the embassy and they sleep with them. Maybe they plug in a thumb drive into a device. Maybe they put a listening device. There's a lot of different ways they exploit males or females, right? And then they have the male equivalent too. But I think this is one of them. We already covered this a little bit. This slide was supposed to be before, but Russian KIAs. Let's do some more examples. These guys are KGB guys, or I'm sorry, KGB, FSB officers who were killed. These guys were killed by a drunk soldier who basically lit them up when they were about to get arrested. This is old. This is way sniffy old, but this one's typical. So this is what a typical, let's say, this guy's been killed in action, right? It's got a picture of him, and then it describes where he was, what he was doing, and the day that he was killed. And then down here, I have all that information split up by unit or where they're from. You can basically tailor this multiple different ways, which I do. Want to see some things that I like to see are where is when there's a draft, are they pulling from the rural areas? Are they pulling from cities? Who does the Russian government not like? If the Russian government doesn't like somebody, like if they're like, well, those like shitty people from Siberia, right? The first people getting drafted are the Siberians, right? Like it's that's not new, not new for Russia. And here's how that looks, right? So you have a region, then you have the cities within that region, and then here's the person who is KIA, and that's their basically notification of death. And so, like I said, it could be inflated. You see here, This specific person was listed in two, this one in two different VK things. Same with that one. So, you know, it's not going to be cut in half, the casualties, especially now, but that's an example. Here's guys from the town, people from the same town. So the moms are getting together and posting all sorts of stuff, right? And like I said, the moms are really pissed off in Russia. You know, I hate the Russian government a lot, obviously. You know, I think that they're tyrannical. I don't think they're ever going to stop. Yeah, that's right. Sorry, Dave. Let me. What's that? Yeah, Ravens. I totally had a brain fart on that. But you know, I do have some sympathy for the men on the ground, right? I'm not that heartless. I've been in combat, and I understand that sucks. But what sucks for a U.S. service member versus a Russian is probably a pretty big difference, right? They're undertrained, they're underfed. They're not like us at all. Let's go next. Okay, Duma. So this one's cool. Their whole Duma is basically, it's their lower house of parliament, kind of like our Senate, right? Representatives from across Russia, and we got everything, literally everything. So documents, files, bills, we got basically all what you would consider the pedigree information for all 450 members, 450 member staff, their email, cells, names, everything. And when I say emails, I don't just mean like a list of the address, also the emails, which I have barely even started to go through. But yeah, pretty crazy shit. I compared that. So in Analyst Notebook, you can have duplicates. So I compared the Russian troops to the locations to see if their sons and daughters are also engaged in the fighting, and they are. And that's where these connections come in. Basically, if you were targeting these people, if let's say we eventually end up going to an actual kinetic war on the ground with Russia, right? You would have targets, right? We would basically take information from data dumps and then like, okay, so we know exactly who this guy is, right? And we have a basic bio on all these people, right? Basic bio, all their communication methods, their entire staffs, and we basically know everything about them from them. This is not coming from us. This is coming from them. Another example, you know, handsome, bald, fat gentleman. I bet under communism he was still eating plenty, right? The Ministry of Interior, right? Federal body responsible for drafting and implementing government policy and legal representation. So that sounds governmental, right? But once I started going through this data dump, it's not, right? The whole thing's a government. It's a Russian military organization. It's not like Interior as we see it. Like when we think kind of like our Ministry of Interior, Department of Interior, we think national parks, right? They have resume and picture after resume, and we're talking 10, maybe 12,000 resumes, right? What this person does, basically the equivalent of their MOS and a picture of them, their accolades, right? You know, of various ranks, it seems like most of the people applying are, well, we would send field grade officers, not flag officers, but field grade. So major and above would be the equivalent to the U.S. military, or lieutenant commander and above if you're Navy. All their contact information, the whole resumes for everybody. Now, one thing I want you to consider is like, if this guy put on a St. Louis Cards jersey and a Cards hat, and they taught him to speak with an English accent, right? He could just fly into any airport in America and he could just fit in, right? Except for Chicago, because don't wear your Cards jersey there, you know. But yeah, that's a funny joke. And here's some more examples, just some of these guys, right? I mean, this could be somebody that you know, right? That's why, unless they still have the accent, if they've been able to get rid of their accent, right, these guys can be pretty effective at spying. Whereas, like, my first deployment was to Africa, to the Horn of Africa, right? I'm pretty pale, right? There's no way for me to fit in with the actual populace, right? I'm obviously a white guy, and they obviously recognize me from a mile away, right? Whereas adversaries like this, unlike China, but although today, America, especially where I live, is the cornucopia of the world, right? So even Chinese spies, they just kind of fit in, because how many times do you go to the grocery store, see somebody Asian and of any ethnicity, and say, "Oh gosh, I haven't seen a Korean in a while," right? It's not how it works, right? We're such a mix of cultures here, you don't notice, right? But especially with these guys, right? Which makes them, in my opinion, a little bit more dangerous. I was looking at this earlier. These are manning documents and things that they need for the Department of Interior, things that they're missing, just really simple stuff. I thought this slide was interesting. Basically, this is part of their cyber platform for the Ministry of Interior. There's a little bit of cyber in every data dump. Like, what are they looking at? What are they concerned with? How are they going to address those issues, et cetera, right? Let me see where we're at. Okay, so this is where it kind of gets interesting. I'm not going to go too into this. I'm going to let you guys do some of your own research, and if you want to reach out, you guys typically know how to do that. My email's the Where's Wally podcast at gmail.com. But can you have an effect from your house, from America, from Canada, from Europe, if you're against Russia? This is more geared anti-Russia than it is anti-Ukraine, but can you affect the battlefield from home? Yeah. Yes, you sure can, right? The way this is one of many ways. So this is just one example of maybe, let's say, 20 to 30 that are available to everybody in the world, right? In this case, VIIRS. This is the Visible Infrared Imaging Radiometric Suite, right? So it's a NASA NOAA, and NOAA is about 15 minutes up the road from me here in Virginia. Basically, observations of Earth, land, the cyrosphere, and the oceans, right? But it can also identify IR through artillery blasts. So what it sees is the muzzle flash of artillery positions, right? With VIIRS, you can, let me see if I actually put this on the next slide. Those are examples. But okay, but in VIIRS, right? So like this is Kyiv, January 2022, May 2022. So obviously there's less light because of the bombing and shelling, and it's wintertime. So Russia at the time was targeting the power plants to try to freeze the Ukrainians to death, right? So that's an example of the change in, heat signatures, IR, power consumption, et cetera. You can do all that. These are not as important, but a lot of countries are involved with these types of satellites. Near Earth orbit, geostationary orbit, deep space orbit, et cetera. But this is pre the invasion. The same satellites, you could identify troop buildups. In some ways, better than Google Earth and Google assets and other open source assets, because it's just kind of the type of imagery that it's taking and how it's used. This is new trenches, so change detection, right? So there's basically a map aspect to all of this. And if I tell it to look at this square, right? When anything happens in that square, you can either get an alert, or you can be notified in various. And I don't know if you can see it on yours, but on mine you can see it. You can kind of see the line. So that's how the digital mapping is split up into sections, right? This is a trench system on one of the Russian defensive lines. So what you can do is basically, when you have that grid, and you see you get a notification that there's basically artillery or tanks firing from that location, right? You get an exact lat long, and this is a very specific lat long. This is down to a couple feet basically, or maybe a meter or two, right? copy that, screenshot it, whatever. There's maybe 200-300 Telegram channels dedicated to the active combat in Ukraine. Drop it in there and just, obviously don't do it with have some OPSEC, don't do it with your real name, right? But hey, you just say something like, hey guys, might be something you want to take a look at, right? And then send them the link if you want. But that's how you can, as a civilian, affect the battlefield. So. And boom, boom, boom. That is it for what I'm prepared to give today. So, like I said, I have another talk coming up in Utah, right? It's going to be some of the same slides, but about 90% is going to be different. We're getting 4, 5, 6, 7 different new Russian, various countries' data dumps a week. I'm getting terabytes plus a week minimum, right? Some weeks 10 terabytes, some weeks less than 1, right? It's very fluid. It just depends on the environment, what's going on in the world. There's a lot of factors, right? So at this, I am going to stop sharing the slides and let's take a minute and answer some questions. Like, why don't you guys throw those questions into the chat, and I'll see if I can answer them. Or not. And hey, Shiz, what's happening? Yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like everything we worked on for like years. It's kind of, sometimes it just comes together really well, So. And yeah, so goosebumps. So listen, guys, I know it's a shit ton of information, and unless you kind of like worked with me before or you came from the same industry, a lot of it makes no sense. And it's so normal to me, it's hard for me to describe it to you. So if there's anything that if there's anything that's really, really, really unclear, hey, shoot me a message, shoot me an email. Like I obviously I'm not going to drop classified on the internet, but all of this is unclassified, right? So I have no problem explaining. I have no problem explaining it. Hey, that's a great question. So, yeah, absolutely. So, here's a good way to think of this: is Russia has some smart people. They do this shit for a living too. They're looking at people like me, right? I haven't been approached by a Russian in any capacity since 8, 9, 10 years, right? If the Russian who is an Intel pro, because sometimes they're not, they're just nosy ass Russians who want to drink, right? But the good ones, the ones who are actually well trained and understand American culture, can talk to you for one drink and they can figure out whether you're going to commit espionage or not. And for me, it's a no, right? It's obvious. I haven't seen, I'm using multiple layers of security. So with the data dumps, let's talk about, does Russia look at my intel? Yes, most likely. Yeah. One thing that we know for sure is happening is within 30 to 45 days of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, they intentionally started to inject various types of malware, viruses into basically corporate data across Russia. Like they try to guesstimate who would be a target next. Russia understands that in some senses there's nothing you can do. You're going to get popped, right? So if we're going to get popped, how do we kind of fight that back, right? So whatever I take these data dumps from any source, and the only source that we've really talked about is like Telegram and the deep and dark web, right? I really run those things through a lot of different security programs, right? Paid ones, free ones. I scan files individually before I open them. Like I take a lot of steps to make sure that I'm not going to lose everything. In addition, this computer, this workstation that I'm on, you can't see it, but over here I have 8 drives, anywhere from 10 to 20 and a whole bunch of 12 terabyte drives. So I don't store anything on the computer at all, right? So like, let's say, unless I'm working on a project, there's just that project also saved off the computer, and not even necessarily in a cloud environment. Like I'm storing this physically on a thing, right? Then I have other backups, right? So if I'm opening up that and I have dirty to clean, I call it dirty to clean. I have junk boxes. So if I really think something's sketchy, but I'm not 100% sure, Intel NUCs, they're not expensive. You can get junk computers from Walmart, Chromebooks, whatever. If it's worth looking at, but you're worried about, if you think it's data that's worth looking at, but you recognize that there's an extremely high risk that you're going to get popped in some way, shape, or form. Don't use your main computer. Don't use your main asset. Use something else, right? Something that's expendable, right? And obviously, you can open some of these files in a virtual environment, sandbox, a lot of different programs, right? And I didn't know all this at first. I had to learn that over the years. So I couldn't even tell you how many things I didn't know that I was doing wrong for 18, 19 years. But hey, Captain Happy, thanks. Appreciate that. Let's see. Can you target individuals that are hiding in plain sight? Yeah. I mean, I can. I'm rusty. I'm not doing this actively. I'm not an active counterintelligence agent per se, right? This sounds cliche, but when you work in the IC on any capacity, security is everybody's responsibility, right? And that's true, right? Even in the corporate world, because if you think that Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, whoever is only looking at the American government or the American military, you're wrong. And in most sense, it's actually the opposite, right? Like, so China, for example, is going to be looking at everybody in every industry. Same with Russia, right? Some industries more than other. Dave and I did a study. China was hacking oncology departments like crazy, and I think this is like 2016. We rebuilt it in 2017, but why we're like, first you ask the question why. It's like, okay, well, China has a 700% higher cancer rate than America, right? China at some point, being a communist country, realized, well, we're going to get overthrown by the billion people in our country if we don't actually give them basic medical services. So they're not hacking the oncology departments because they care about your personal information. They need the body of data, right? The body of medical data to help address medical issues that they don't have that body of data. So they don't care about your personal information. They're not trying to open credit cards in your name. It's body of data so that they can make good medical decisions. So, question, let's see, did the Russians not realize how vulnerable? No. It's hard to say. Some do, some don't. Some emails that I've had translated, even the shitty Google Translate style, they're not too busy. No. Some departments do care. Some departments, like their foreign service, the SVD, they really care. They really do have some OPSEC. Let's say in general, if there's an organization that has OPSEC, it's them. But then they're still like, they still get out of like Moscow, let's say, and they get to New York and they're like, fuck yeah, they still party and they still talk and they still drink and they, but yeah, they seem to know that their data is very vulnerable. Their response to it is what I would consider weak or uncoordinated. Yeah, it's, but they do know, I think. And in some sense, they don't care. It's like, they're so indoctrinated in some levels, like, oh, nobody can defeat Russia. Blah, blah, blah. It's, it's like, yeah, okay, guys, whatever. Let's see. Let's go. Yeah, that's a great point. So there's a few indicators beforehand. What kicked it off, though, we kind of found this out a little bit later. We did see a huge uptick in Russian groups that we hadn't seen active in a while, all of a sudden being very active against various infrastructure in Ukraine. And not just Ukraine, like several places, Estonia, Romania, Latvia. taking out power grids, messing with transportation. But then one thing I found out later is like we had been providing weapons to Ukraine for quite some time. Like it's just part of some type of agreement. Like you get rid of your nukes, and we will give you this stuff. Right now, we I've maybe that started under the Obama or the Bush administration, but they weren't allowed to use those specific weapons that we gave to them or sold to them or whatever capacity. This is pre-invasion, right? Until 2019. So I think it was September 2019, like those very, let's say, advanced weapon systems started to be used in Crimea on like basically the small wars, small engagements, right? Russia noticed pretty quick, and that's when the buildup started on the border, right? Or maybe it was not 2019, but I'm getting my dates mixed up. But shortly after the Biden administration approved use of those weapon systems in Crimea, Russia noticed very quickly that it's not just like a proxy war. It's not just like you lose a couple troops a month, because Russia doesn't really give a shit about how many troops they lose, right? They're pretty casualty immune, you could say. But they noticed pretty quickly, and then cyber went up as a precursor. Right now, Russia and Ukraine are the most targeted countries in the world, and then I think the third is America after that, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't looked in a while. And then, yeah. So, and one reason it's screwed the pooch, like, was just basically logistics. Remember that there's that huge convoy that came in from Belarus, and it's like they forgot their fuel trucks, right? So everything ran out of gas, right? Then they had problems getting the gas in, and then they ran out of food, and so a bunch of the troops walked back to Belarus, right? Once some of our like Patriot and Javelin and whatever missile systems came in, the Ukrainians very smartly attacked the small vehicles, not necessarily the tanks, right? Because resupply is difficult because there's only a certain amount of avenues into Crimea and from Crimea into Ukraine. So they targeted, and then to the point where the Russians had to go back across the border, get things like city buses, load those up with artillery shells and beans, bullets, band-aids, and drive them across because they were just targeting so heavily those small vehicles, right? But yeah, here's the thing. Yeah, Russia collects a lot of data on a lot of people, and they try to exploit that as much, but they collect a lot, but they don't end up doing a lot with it. Or maybe maybe it seems like there's a huge disconnect between the intelligence apparatus and the troops on the ground, right? I think that's probably a good way to describe it. Anybody else got any questions? Been on for 2 hours, right? So let's talk about some of the things I'm going to be doing this next few weeks on this podcast, right? I have some old talks with renewed data. One that actually Dave and I did was called DNC Data in the Hands of a Trained Intelligence Professional. I'm going to be updating that. I'm going to be updating that, and basically there's a way you take emails. Sorry, I got stuff going on in my office. It's my SIG NPX just fell down, which is crazy. Okay. Nevertheless, I took my old communication network from the DNC, and then I created a new one with the Hunter Biden emails from that hack, and I put those two together, and there's connections, obviously, right? So I'm going to talk about that. I don't know what day. I'm not going to promise a day yet, but that's coming soon. We got another question. Let's see. Yep. So I would believe right now, I would believe very little of any of it, unless you can. For example, I talked about this last night, right? If you can get at the actual source of the video or the picture, and you can use metadata to confirm a geolocation and a timestamp, I wouldn't believe it, right? It's kind of believe what you can see. The numbers are being inflated on both sides. the Israelis and Hamas, they're obviously using things for their own PR, for their own purposes. They're being described in different ways. But use common sense, right? Like TikTok is not a place to go for news, right? Don't get rid of your TikTok, right? Completely, right? Yeah, just for starters, get rid of TikTok. This is going to sound crazy, but I found that some parts of Al Jazeera actually has some actual news, especially coming out of the Middle East. Now, that being said, it's about 10% is actual news, and then the other 90% is biased, obviously, against Israel, right? Obviously, the Jerusalem Times is for Israel, right? You have to use common sense, right? But here's what you can see. You can go on YouTube and you can see live feeds, right? Some of those live feeds are on loop. I mean, it's really crazy. But I wouldn't trust any of it, right? But the base information is correct, right? Hamas surprise attacked Israel. They killed unarmed women, children, babies, old people. They took hostages, at least 270. They killed at least 20 Americans. It looks like they have now, the new numbers are 27 Americans held hostage. And there's 20, I think the State Department said 20 Americans that are unaccounted for. It looks like 1,300 people between the rocket barrages and direct action were killed in the Israeli side. And it looks like a minimum of 3,000 to 5,000 on the Palestinian side. It seems like everybody who didn't, because it's kind of a wave thing, right? They had guys who shot and they had guys who kidnapped. The guys who kidnapped and made it back across to Palestine survived. Essentially, everybody who stayed to fight unarmed people at a rave, they're all dead. All the guys in all the kibbutz, they're all dead, right? They went over there to die, and they did. What you can also know is true. We know that Israel is going to respond, and they are going to respond with a heavy hand, and they are going to kill everybody responsible, right? And think about if it was your family who got killed, what steps would you take? What steps would you take to avenge your family, right? And the Jews are no stranger to any of us, right? And yeah, and I agree with Dave on this, right? So there are sources where I am getting stuff that is literally like it's damn near real time, right? It gives you, but here's the problem with the damn near real time stuff that I actually believe is real, right? Think of it as very narrowly focused. So it's a very, very small view of a very large conflict. But I can't. But it's like, okay, so I don't speak Arabic, I don't speak Palestinian, I don't speak Hebrew, etc. But if I see a street sign, I can find that location. I can typically find the location anyway. But that gives me an example. There is combat operation right now at this location, and then I can find that. But yes, some Telegram channels and Signal channels and Discord are better than others, and you are getting stuff, if not minutes, within hours of when it's actually happening. So that's a great point, Dave. Thanks. There's American hostages. U.S. special operations are on the ground. Biden has not given them the okay to physically put boots on the ground in Palestine or Gaza. So, having worked that job before, I assume they are advising. They are advising with probably intelligence and training, munitions, etc. Israeli special operations, right, to do the job on behalf of America. If you're also not aware, there's a U.S. carrier group that's right off of Gaza. That is basically a floating military. There's a MU capacity to that, which is Marine Expeditionary Unit. if they take an American out and publicly execute them or behead them, I think that the stance will change very quickly. And then I think U.S. Special Operations will win the fights that they get into in those countries. So I wouldn't want to say too much more, but we have elements in the U.S. military that are very good at hostage rescue. You're welcome, AJ. So yeah, I'm going to stay on for another, let's say, I don't know, 5-10 minutes. I do want to do some thank yous. Shout out to Dave. Obviously, Dave, thanks for being on. Dave's been an awesome person in my life for many years. Trolls a lot. That trolling's always awesome, always appreciated, always funny. If he wasn't trolling me, he's mad, right? So but we don't always agree, and that's how you know when you can really love and respect somebody is when you can disagree on something and talk about it, right? And which what more of us should be doing with each other, right? Shout out to Stone Vets. Stone Vets, I saw your video earlier, man. Thanks for trying to explain how like my mind works, right? Because this is normal. This shit is normal for me, and I'm trying to get it out in a way that makes sense, right? Because I can think about it in my head and it makes sense all day, the way it's going, how it's working, what it's doing. And I always think, I don't just think about today, I think about tomorrow and the next week and what's going to happen in a year and 2 years and 3 years and stuff like that. And so thanks for trying to clarify that it's, it's new, but it's important. And and some people they don't think that I should. They don't know. They're not convinced that I should be having talks like this with you. I think it's okay. I'm not really seeing anything classified at all. So, and we actually, Dave and I have had some incidents where we had to very much verify that. So, and I'm going from that verification from a very legitimate high entity. And that's basically my thumbs up that this is okay. Let me see. Is there a? Yes, absolutely. So this is their 9/11, MJ. Yeah, it's I guess if I was going to compare it to something, it is. They haven't had let's say a single day loss of life like that since the 10-day war. But it's been a while since they've had anything like this. But yeah, it's significant casualties. It's basically their version of 9/11. Politically, yeah, there's been some political tension between the various groups within Israel. Unfortunately, it took this event to bring a lot of those, a lot of these Israeli political groups have put their issues aside to come together on this issue. Now, maybe they still want to address the issue differently, but all the parties, and there's a lot of parties. It's not like Democrat and Republican. There's a lot of different parties, but they agree that something has to be done, and this can't happen again. So yes, I would. That's a really good point. Spot on. This is a good one. So yes, they do. American companies do, I think, on some level. I'm not sure if that's state by state or a federal law. I'd have to look into that. Let me think. So if I pull one of these data dumps and it's an American company, and I can pretty easily, let's say there's emails in that dump, and I see an email from yesterday or the day before, like I will look up and I will try to contact somebody from that company, right? CISO, CTO, director of IT, somebody in a situation, somebody in a position in the company that can make a decision quick. I also have the resources to find their numbers, cell phones, emails, right? But a lot of that's posted, right? But I'll find the company and I'll let them know myself. I don't feel that I always have to. It's not like I'm legally obligated. I don't believe, but I do reach out to people like, hey, listen, are you aware of X, Y, and Z? No. Okay. Sir, I'm sending you a Zoom invite or a Google Meets right now. You need to cancel your other calls and you need to get on the line with me, right? I've done that dozens, if not 100 times since I've been at my current job. So then I try to get them to hire us for a Pendest. So yes, I do. Yeah, I've been talking to a few guys. We're going to do basically kind of a roundtable about OPSEC. We're going to cover personal OPSEC, phone OPSEC, computer OPSEC. A lot of stuff to guys who've been doing this job for a while. It seems rudimentary and simple, but to people who aren't aware of OPSEC, it's a seemingly unnecessary, and why would I have to worry about that issue? But it's a serious issue, and you should take it OPSEC very seriously. So, but yes, that's coming. I don't know exactly when. I'll definitely post something like I did for this one. Where you get the what do you call it? Like, stay tuned. Video will start at this. But we're me and some guys are chatting over email about what we're going to talk about and when. We're trying to get some guys to get together for that. So, yep. Cool. Anybody else got any other questions? It's kind of sad. There's a little less trolling than normal, but yeah, man, no problem. All right. Well, some of the channels, like if you haven't been on, Shiz Happens, really good channel to like and subscribe. Georgia Transparency, been working with them. Master Sergeant retired. Stone Vets, those are some. I'm either working with them on a specific issue with Stolen Valor, and Stone Vets and I have known each other for many years. So, obviously, we've been on each other's podcasts quite a bit, and go check out those channels. A few other people I would highly recommend that you guys check out are Everyday Spy. Love that guy. Yep, that's right, Dear Mid Fraud at Wrangler. Everyday Spy, great channel. In addition to that, Peter Zion. It's Zion. Let's see. Z-E-I-H-N. Let's see. Sorry, I'll post these down there. These are some good resources, right? Is it over there? Yep. Oopsie. If you want some really, really, really solid kind of, I like unbiased stuff. Now I understand. Zion on geopolitics. Yeah, thanks. Good comment. Yep. Oopsie, shit. Okay, push the comment. Oh. Zion on geopolitics is great. Let's do Everyday Spy. Everyday Spy is good. Him and his wife are both former CIA Foreign Service agents or officers, right? And he tends to show. Everybody has their biases, right? But he's like, here's how the Palestinians see it, here's how the Israelis see it, etc. So like, but he does that for a lot. Peter Zion, his latest book is The End of the World is Just the Beginning. If you haven't read it, it's an outstanding book. The book before that, he basically predicted if you're watching Russia, them invading Ukraine was not a surprise at all. If you read his book, he goes into why, population statistics, dwindling, dwindling populations and why does that affect geopolitics and warfare and everything else. And two really good channels to watch. And there's a bunch more, but we'll talk about all those later. And let's see. Thanks for the channel. Yeah, no problem. But at that, guys, hey, listen, I'm going to sign off. I'm going to drop my email. Oops, not that email. I'm going to drop my email into my podcast email into the chat. And if you guys got any questions, oops, shit. Here we go. If you guys have any questions, if you guys have any suggestions, right? You know, throw them out there. Hey, please like, subscribe, share. The more exposure, the better for some of these things. You know, don't be afraid to put yourself out there, right? Like you probably don't just listen. You know, don't just stream snipe. If you guys have something to say, get on the internet and go say it, right? If you believe it and you get scrutinized for it, fine, right? I'm getting more used to it. I'm just, you know, obviously I'm here in my office alone and I'm talking to a screen with a microphone and I'm surrounded by my knickknacks and things that I'm doing during the day, right? But I really appreciate you guys tuning in. If you guys have suggestions, email me. I might not get to it like the next day because like Josh said in one of his videos this morning, I actually don't just, I'm old enough now that I don't just shoot out something, right? It just doesn't, you know, I just don't, I have to research, and some things I have an opinion on because I have a lot of experience in and I already know the answer to, but a lot of things I don't. So if you guys have anything that you want to see, you'd like me to address, have any questions about a lot of things, man, go ahead and ask. But at that, we're just dudes watching dudes who's watching dudes. That's right. But hey, guys, I'm going to sign off. Thanks for checking me out. Like and subscribe, ask questions, get out there, and I will see you guys sometime this week. All right. Later, guys.